All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating happening in Europe's energy scene right now. It's what I'm calling the Great Solar Paradox. See, in 2024, Europe put up more solar panels than ever before in history, a new record. But at the exact same time, the industry is getting hit with some pretty serious crisis warnings. So how on earth can record-breaking growth actually signal a huge problem? That's what we're going to unpack.
The report we're breaking down today really doesn't pull any punches. It kicks off with this incredibly powerful warning, calling the situation a yellow card. Like in soccer. It's a clear signal that, hey, while the solar story has been amazing so far, there are some serious fouls happening on the field that we absolutely cannot ignore. This is not a victory lap, not by a long shot. And you have to remember why this is also surprising. It feels like just yesterday, during the big energy crisis, that solar was the hero of the story, right? It was swooping in, providing affordable, secure power exactly when Europe needed it most. It was on this incredible, record-breaking growth streak. It really felt like a golden age for solar. And that growth wasn't just big, it was explosive. Back in 2023, the EU solar market shot up by a massive 53%. Just let that sink in for a second. More than half of the market size was added in a single year. That's the kind of momentum that just feels unstoppable. But then, 2024 happened. And that rocket ship of growth, it slammed on the brakes. Hard. From a soaring 53% all the way down to just 4%. It's a truly staggering change of pace. And honestly, it caught a lot of people completely off guard.
Let's just put that into perspective. We're talking about a 92% decrease in the rate of growth. Now, to be clear, the market didn't shrink. It still grew. But its expansion slowed to a crawl compared to the absolutely breakneck speed we'd gotten used to. So, the billion-dollar question is, what on earth happened?
And look, this slowdown wasn't just one country's problem. This was a trend across the continent. You can see here, 5 of the top 10 solar markets, so half of them, actually installed less solar in 2024 than they did the year before. The Netherlands, for example, took the biggest hit, dropping by a pretty significant 1.8 gigawatts.
And this right here, this brings us to the very heart of the paradox. You're probably thinking, wait a minute, a new record of 65.5 gigawatts? That sounds like a good thing. How is that a slowdown? And you know what? You're not wrong to think that. But the real story, the one that's setting off all the alarm bells, isn't that total number. It's the shocking slowdown in the rate of growth.
So let's break this paradox down. On the one hand, yes, the total amount of solar installed did set a new record. It edged up from 62.8 gigawatts to 65.5. So, on paper, that's a win. But, and this is a really big but, here's the twist. While more panels went up, the actual amount of money invested in the sector dropped. And not by a little. It fell 13%, from over 63 billion euros down to 55 billion. So, how do you install more stuff with less money? Well, the answer is pretty simple. A massive historic price drop for solar panels themselves. The culprit, if you can call it that, was a 70% price collapse from the highs of 2022. This was mostly driven by a global glut in manufacturing. All of a sudden, the same amount of money could buy way more physical panels than it could just a year before.
Now, you'd think cheaper solar panels would be a clear win for everyone, right? And in many ways, it is. But what this price drop really did was pull back the curtain. It's kind of like when the tide goes out and you suddenly see all the rocks and issues that were hiding just beneath the surface during the boom times.
So what are these big problems that were unmasked? Well, first, the rooftop solar market is hitting the brakes now that the urgency of the energy crisis is gone. Second, and this one is huge, our electricity grids are seriously struggling to keep up. They're so congested that we're seeing negative prices, where power producers literally have to pay people to take their electricity. Third, big sectors like heavy industry just aren't switching over to electricity fast enough to soak up all this new solar power. And of course, the old classics, permitting delays and political uncertainty, are still gumming up the works.
And just to hammer home that electrification problem, for the last 5 years, the EU's electrification rate has been just stuck at around 23%. We're getting better and better at generating clean electricity, but we're not creating enough new demand for it in places like heating and transportation. It's a major bottleneck.
What's really interesting is how these systemic issues created this wild split in the market. It was like a tale of two solars. While the residential rooftop market, panels on people's homes, absolutely plummeted by nearly 5 gigawatts, the giant utility-scale solar farms had their best year in half a decade. It was actually these massive projects that single-handedly dragged the total numbers into record territory.
So how do we fix this whole mess? The good news is the report lays out a pretty clear 4-step recovery plan. Step 1, we need a flexibility revolution. Think massive energy storage and much smarter grids. Step 2, we've got to accelerate electrification to create that demand we talked about. Step 3, use new policies to bring some manufacturing back to Europe for a more resilient supply chain. And step 4, finally, for goodness sake, cut the red tape and streamline project approvals.
And the stakes here are absolutely enormous, because look at this. Nearly 2/3 of all the solar power in the European Union is on rooftops, 64%. This makes that slowdown in the residential market so incredibly critical. Rooftop solar is literally the backbone of Europe's entire solar fleet, and if it starts to falter, the whole energy transition could be in jeopardy. So this is the bottom line. Because of all these challenges, the EU's big 2030 climate and energy targets are now at risk. For the very first time, this report is warning that in a worst-case scenario, the EU could miss its 2030 solar goal by a staggering 100 gigawatts. That's a huge miss. Which really leaves us with this one big, thought-provoking question. Solar power gave Europe the tool it needed to get through the last energy crisis. It absolutely delivered. The question now is whether Europe is going to return the favor. Will it build the grids, create the policies, and invest in the flexibility that solar needs to power a secure, sustainable future? That, right there, is the choice that's on the table.